So today we're going to talk about how can the type of root and the sign of the radicand affect how many solutions and the types of solutions that you have. So I want to do a quick recap from the other day. So this first example here is the square root of 3. Remember that this little number out front here, which there is nothing here because this would be a square root, so that's a 2. That little number is called your index. So because this is a 2, this is what we would call an even index or an even root. Okay. This second one is 4 to the 2/3. So to figure out what type of root or index this has, you want to rewrite it in radical form. So this would be the cube root of 4 to the 2nd. So if you're unsure how to get that, go back and rewatch the video from earlier this week. So in this situation, our index is 3. So this is what we would call an odd root because 3 is an odd number. And in this last example, our index is 8. So think about if this is going to be an even or an odd root. Hopefully you came up with the fact that this would be an even root because 8 is an even number. The other thing I want to review real quick is what the radicand is. So the radicand, remember, is this expression underneath the radical. So in this case, this is just a 3. This is positive because there's no negative sign at all. So this is a positive radicand. So this radicand would be greater than 0. Positive radicand. And again, that means it is greater than 0. For the second one, kind of separate this. There we go. Your radicand is 4 to the 2nd. Okay, and again, that is positive, right? There's no negative symbol anywhere. So this would also be a positive, I'll just abbreviate this, radicand. So again, this one is greater than 0. This last situation, our radicand is negative 72. So this is no longer positive because we have that negative sign in there. So this is what we would call a negative, and again, we're going to abbreviate, negative radicand. Squeeze that in there. So this is one that is less than 0. Okay, so just kind of recapping, how do I figure out what the index is, whether that's positive, or whether that's even or odd, and then taking a look at your radicand and making sure you can identify if that is positive or negative. So the things we just reviewed, the even versus odd roots and the sign of the radicand, that's very important because that's going to tell you what types of solutions you have. So first I want to talk about when your radicand is greater than 0. So that means that your radicand is positive. Okay, it's got to be positive. So if your radicand is positive and you have an even root, so your index is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever, as long as it is an even number, remember, even root means the index is even. That means you have 2 real solutions. So every time your radicand is positive, it's greater than 0, and your index is even, you're going to have 2 real solutions. So what I mean by that, let's look at an example. If we have something like x equals square root of 9, well, you probably know by this point that if we do the square root of 9, we are asking what number times itself gives us 9. Okay, well, 3 times 3 gives us 9. But if we think a little bit harder, hopefully we realize that negative 3 times negative 3 also will give us 9. Hence, we have 2 real solutions. One of those solutions is positive 3. The second of these solutions is negative 3. Let's look at one that might be a little bit different. than what we're used to seeing. Here we have x equals the 12th root of 100. I do not know this off the top of my head, so don't be afraid to put this in the calculator. Remember, when you put this in the calculator, you're going to want to put it into rational exponent form. So this is really the same thing as having 100 to the 1/12th power. Make sure, though, that this entire fraction stays in the exponent, so you may want to put parentheses around it. Okay, so if you do 100 to the 1/12th in the calculator, you should get approximately, remember squiggly equals means approximately, 1.46. So if I take this 1.46 and I multiply it by itself 12 times, I'm going to get 100. Well, if I take negative 1.46 times itself 12 times, I'm still going to get 100. Hence, again, we've got two real solutions. One of those solutions would be positive, approximately positive 1.46, and approximately negative 1.46. Now this changes a little bit. When that index is odd, then we have an odd root. Okay, when that happens, we have one real solution only. So let's look at an example here. Here we have x equals the cube root of 27. So again, we're asking ourselves, what number times itself 3 times will give me 27? Okay, well 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So you might be thinking, okay, well when it was the square root, negative 3 also worked to get 9. So would negative 3 work here? Well, let's see. If I do negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, I get negative 27. So this is not going to work anymore. So we really only have one real solution. Let's look at one, again, that looks a little bit different than what we're used to. Here we have x equals the 11th root of 18. So again, you might not know this one off the top of your head. Don't be afraid to put that in the calculator. If you put that in the calculator, this would become 18 to the 1/11. Again, you want to make sure that entire fraction is in the exponent side, put parentheses around that. And you should get approximately 1.3. So if I do 1.3 times itself 11 times, I should get 18. If I do negative 1.3 times itself 11 times, I'm going to end up with negative 18. So again, you only have one real solution. The negative will not work. If your radicand is exactly equal to 0, then depending on what root you have, you'll actually have the same outcome. So let's look at a couple examples before I tell you what this outcome is. So if you have an even root, so let's say, for example, on the left here, you have x equals the 10th root of 0. Well, you're asking yourself, what times itself 10 times is going to give me 0? So in this situation, x equals 0. We don't need to worry about the sign of that answer because 0 is neither positive nor negative. It's a neutral number. So x would equal 0. Looking at your odd root, if x is equal to the cube root of 0, now we're asking what times itself 3 times will give me 0. Well, again, 0 is the only possible answer there. So if your radicand is exactly equal to 0, regardless of whether you have an even or an odd index, an even or an odd root, your solution will always, always, always equal 0. Always. If your radicand is less than 0, so that means you have a negative number under your radical, again, your number and type of solution will depend on what type of root you are dealing with. So if we're talking about an even root, if your radicand is less than 0, if it's negative, because really this just means it's a negative number, then you will have no real solutions. Okay, so if we look at an example here, x equals the 4th root of negative 8. So you're saying what number times itself 4 times will equal a negative 8? Well, you can't multiply an even number of negatives and have it come out to still be a negative. So this would have no real solutions. If you tried to do this on your calculator, an error would come up that says unreal. So that's a good hint that there are no real solutions. So you will get an error on the calculator in this situation. If you have an odd root, you will end up with one real solution. So if we're thinking about the cube root of negative 27, then x would have to equal negative 3 here. There's no way to have a positive number times itself 3 times to end up with a negative. You can only do that with a negative number. So that's why there is only one real solution. And again, if you're unsure, you can throw that into the calculator. Remember, you just have negative 27, and then your exponent would be 1/3. Okay, here are a few for you to try, so go ahead and pause the video. You do have calculators available to you through the Calculate 84 app or the Wabbit Emu app or Desmos. So if you would like to use a calculator, feel free, but you can also try it without one if you want to. So pause the video, try these 4, and then come back and see how you did. Okay, so for number 1, we have an odd root because our index is odd, and we have a negative radicand, which means our radicand is less than 0 with an odd root, so I should come up with one real solution, and that solution would be negative 6. For number 2, I've got an even root, my index is 4, and I have a positive radicand, so I should come up with 2 real solutions. Okay, so 3 times itself 4 times because it's 81, and negative 3 times itself 4 times does give you positive 81. Number 3, I've got an even root and a negative radicand, so I should have no real solutions. So if I were to do this in the calculator, again, you'd have negative 64 raised to the 1/6 power. You will get that error, so we know that there are no real solutions for this situation. And then number 4, I've got an odd root and I have a positive radicand, so I should have one real solution, which will end up being 3. So if you need help with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, guys.